Welcome, everybody, to Change Your Story, Change Your Life. I'm your host, Mitch Austin, speaker and transformational coach, as well as religious science practitioner and ministerial intern. So glad you could join us today. Our show is about looking at the defining moments of our life and when our stories changed and how that brought in a lesson or blessing in our life. This show is born out of a class that I teach called R.Sc.P, where I help people look at their life, or what I call their mess, and make it their message over the journey of 7 weeks and then perform it live on stage. So I am programming this class for the fall. So if you have a center or community that would like to sponsor a class, please reach out to me and we'll see if we can get you on the schedule. It's truly life changing. And what I was noticing during the class, when people were looking at their defining moments and they were doing that look back from their present day self, people were healing. They were seeing the deeper meaning in their journey and sharing it with a small group of people. And even that aspect of the program had tremendous healing. So I thought, why not create a show? And so here we are. And actually, our guest today is Leah Eldridge. And she was one of the first students in the Rise and Speak program in 2018. And she's been in several of the classes and programs. She's been one of my teacher's assistants. And I thought, wow, when I had this show, I thought, well, Leah's got to be on it because she's phenomenal. And I know a little bit about her story. Leah is a spiritual seeker, as well as a wife, a mother, and a licensed CSL practitioner. She's also a unique and one-of-a-kind realtor. And I know sometimes realtors say that, but she really is. She brings her whole practitioner self to her business, which I think is really unique in the industry that she's in. Leah is working hard to learn to let go of the habit of hiding and moving into her more authentic expression in life. And she wants to encourage everybody to do the same, which I think is why she's here today. So I want to welcome Leah. So glad you could join us on the show. Tell us a little bit about where you're at today and what you're up to.
Well, today I am in my mobile office and I am parked in a beautiful park in Northern California so that I could join the show. I'm so excited to be here. I really, really do. I love the Rise and Speak program. I love what it does for lives. It made a huge difference in my life, and I am excited to share how that all works.
Well, thank you for always saying yes and playing with me. I so appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's good fun.
And what I know about your journey, Leah, is that you didn't start out in science of mind. In fact, you were very steeped in the Catholic tradition. Your family, you went to Catholic school, like had the whole kind of lens of spirit of God, of religion through the Catholic teachings. And then somewhere along the line, you found this little wonky center called the Center for Spiritual Awareness in West Sacramento that really had a huge impact on your life. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about, that transition and what that has meant for you.
Well, it's true that I grew up Catholic. Around whatever age it is you are in 6th grade, I started to question what I was being taught. There was a lot of it that it just didn't feel right. I don't know, at that age, I don't think it was an intellectual thing. I think it was an inner knowing that some people get the prize and some people don't, and that you could make a mistake that would, you know, ruin your life forever. And you could make that mistake in sixth grade. And it just, it just, the fact that the creator of everything would behave that way, even to my preteen self, didn't make any sense.
That must have
And
been that must have
well,
been a
and
lot of pressure.
it was a lot of pressure. I'm not sure that my parents were very, um, they absolutely weren't believers. They weren't. My grandmother was, and I got a lot of wisdom from my grandmother. Um, but it was about the appearances, to be the cool kids on the block. Your kids had to go to that private school. Um, it, it was about appearances. It wasn't, none of it was real.
Mm,
And
yes.
and then when I was older, I stopped doing church altogether, but then I had, children, and I felt like they have to have some sort of spiritual foundation.
Mhm.
And one of my defining moments happened when I was very young, and then the other one happened like 30 years later. But it, I just always knew that there was something bigger than us running the show, and I knew that the story that I was getting wasn't real.
Mm.
And then I started shopping churches, and I keep saying I've got to go back and do Rise and Speak again as a student so we can talk about that. But uh, I started looking for a church for them. And when I found the Center for Spiritual Awareness, the only reason I went in there was because it wasn't called a church. It was
Wow.
called a center.
Right.
And I
Right.
liked the idea of spiritual awareness, and I had no clue what a center was. And it took me, I saw it, and it took me the better part of a year to get up the courage to go in.
Yeah, and I wanna unpack that, but before I wanna go back to something that you said about that first defining moment, and before we
Hmm.
jump into that, Kathy Clark Amos says, "I loved my experience with transformational rise and speak at the Amani Center." Thank you, Kathy, for
Yeah. Hi,
giving a
Kathy.
plug and for participating, and we have several other people on with us, Wayne Baldwin, Linda Herman, Angie Gann, and Sonia Clark. Thank you for joining us live. It's always nice to know that, we have people with us as we journey through this show live, and we love your comments. So going back to that first defining moment,
Hmm.
when you in your childhood, can you take us into that moment? Because I think it's really an amazing moment, from
Yeah.
when you brought it onto the stage, and we don't talk enough about these things, so
No, no. And that was the whole point of that, was for me to share something. My first Rise and Speak was, well, it's the only one I've ever performed. Um, it was it was a teaching assignment for me, and then it turned into a life-changing moment. This thing that happened to me, I had never told to anybody except for my partners. I mean, the number of people outside of the people that were there that knew this was about four. And
Mm.
briefly, what happened was I was 10, and I was camping in the backyard with my sister and another friend. And we didn't have a tent because it was one of those really hot nights. So we were just out under the stars.
Mhm.
And we saw this shooting star. And you know how sometimes you see a shooting star and it's really bright and it's got some color? This one had this big, long green tail
Mm.
behind it. And
Wow.
when that green streak in the sky faded, all of a sudden, two of us were 10 and one of us was 8. And we just knew the answers to everything. And it's,
Mm.
the fear when you say that out loud is that people are going to think that you didn't,
Mm.
or that you're
Mhm.
making it up, or you were asleep, or, how much could 2 10-year-olds and an 8-year-old know? We knew it. We knew it all.
Yeah.
And we knew it for a brief period of time. And toward the end, um, I remember talking about we can't fall asleep. When we fall asleep, it's going to go away. We only get this for as long as we can stay awake. I remember talking about that out loud.
Mm,
And I've talked to my sister about it, and she sort of remembers it,
mhm.
but not with the clarity that I do. And the other gal who was with us, I called her and asked her about it, and she expressly did not want to talk about it at all, which to me says, yeah, you know that that happened too.
Mhm.
Um, but it was this moment of just being present with that infinite intelligence, I think. And it was a gift.
Mm,
And I got up and shared it with everybody. And I'm a pretty comfortable public speaker, and I did my thing, and it was all good and well. And then I got up the next morning and had a flat out crisis. Oh my God, I told everybody my story. I said that in front of Reverend George. Oh no.
I remember you called me in a panic. You're like, "What did I
I was
do?"
crying. I think I was fully crying when I called you. I'm like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I asked my wife, I'm like, I think I need to talk about the shooting star. She's like, I don't think there's anything else you have to say. I thought for sure that's what you were going to do. I was like, I was going to
Mm,
talk about coming out. I was going to talk about church
mhm.
shopping. She's like, no.
So she even saw the value in you talking
Hmm.
about a mystical experience because and I love that you did this because it was very brave, right? To talk about, yeah, this happened and then we had this mystical experience and I still remember it. Because I think the tendency is, oh, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to freak people out or people are going to think I'm weird or something's wrong with me or that I'm not a credible person, right? When
The
we
biggest thing for me, so I do not, let's make this very clear. I do not remember what it was that I knew. What I know is that I knew it, and I knew it for
Mhm,
several hours.
mhm.
And so did the other people who were with me.
Wow.
What my fear was that I wasn't going to be believed. It's such a special memory to me to
Mm,
have people say that didn't happen. You hallucinated that.
right.
And now that I have,
Mhm.
shared this with lots of people at this point, I don't really care anymore. Believe me or don't, it
Right,
happened.
right. It's the stories that we don't tell that kinda hold us hostage to our own judgments, but when we
Hmm.
let them out, it releases
Hmm.
us and it frees the audience. Didn't you get some really positive interactions after the show, like people come up and talk to
I
you?
did. People ran up to me afterward and said something like that happened to me. It wasn't, my memory of it isn't quite that clear. I had somebody tell me about a near death experience and how people
Mhm,
don't believe them with
mhm.
that.
Yeah.
I have had a lot of people, and I mean this was in 2018, so it's been a handful of years now since this has happened.
Mhm,
I've done it more than once.
mhm,
Um, and people always come up, and that's kind of the point of the story. We
mhm.
need to talk about this
Yeah.
in an era when, you know, there is a significant amount of people willing to say out loud, does God really exist? Or is there something more? There's more of us who know from a deep place, from an experiential place, that there is something more, and we need
And
to talk about
we do need to talk about it, and we can have that direct experience of it. I it's my goal and my vision that more of us will kinda come out about these experience that we've had, and
it.
I would
Hmm.
love to normalize it. Wouldn't it be great to normalize it? This
It
experience or
and can
connection.
you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine if we could find a place where we could sit around and help each other pull that back up again to remember more?
Oh, absolutely. Because then as we invite it in, what I've noticed is, it grows. Our
Mhm.
capacity to have these experiences get, stronger and stronger. So, I just love that you shared that, with our audience today, and we're getting a lot of really great reactions here. Um, Maybe some of them here will pop up on the screen. Uh, with some of the comments, because we're getting Sonia Clark says she loves this story, and we're talking about A Circle of Love, Wayne Baldwin. So we have a lot of good ones. Cheryl's online. Thanks, Cheryl, for tuning in. So I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions, Leah, because I know you've had quite a journey here. If your life were a book, what would the title be?
You know, better late than never.
Well, tell us more. That's intriguing.
You know, I'm trying to allow myself to think of that everything happens right on time. In, you know, it just seems like I've arrived. Oh, wait, you didn't bring this with you, or this still needs to be healed.
Right.
You know, you keep hitting these, you know, I thought so. Uh, I used to be married to a man, and I came out as a 38-year-old, which is pretty
Mm,
late to the party.
mm,
And my dad was afraid that, you know, all the things that I had said, she's going to hate me and everything. And one of the best things about that period of my life was my sister said to my dad, "Have you seen her lately? She's never been this happy in her whole life." And and then I thought, you know, there was a couple of years there I'm like, this is it. I'm arrived, you know. I
mhm,
can just cruise through life like this forever, you
mhm.
know, being who I really am. Oh, no, this isn't all of who you really are. This was just your big, scary secret. Now you've got the little ones and all the other places that need to be.
Right.
And it
Right.
just seems to keep happening to me over and over and over again. Well, okay, welcome to the party, Leah. We invited you, you know, a millennia ago, whatever.
Well, yeah, and given the fact that you were raised Catholic, right? So there's a very specific program and script, right? You're going to be
Hmm.
Catholic, you're going to marry a man, you're going to have a family, you're going to go to church, and yet there's this other part of you that you were struggling with, not just at 38, but for many years, right?
Hmm. And you know, I think one of the difficulties about my upbringing is this idea that you could do a thing wrong. You know, for those who don't know, there's two levels of sins. And there is this, they call it a mortal sin. A mortal sin, there's no forgiveness for. And,
Mm.
you know, I've read that book because y'all made me read it. And it doesn't say that in there anywhere.
Uh-oh.
But there, you know, and then you have these other little sins, which I forget what they call them. And you go to the priest and you tell them in the little box,
Right,
and then they say, you know,
right,
do a bunch of Hail Marys and go clean the rectory, and then you're absolved of this. And
right.
it just, there were so many places where I had failed, not so much in the church's eyes, but in my parents' eyes,
Oh.
in my own expectations of myself. and
Mhm.
and that idea that you can't forgive that it's, oh, you blew it now, you know, and you haven't stepped foot in the church to ask anybody's forgiveness for forever. And then I went to this new
Right.
place and I walked in the door and I didn't even have to ask. They just said, "You're perfect." I mean, what the,
Wow. Yeah,
you
they say
know?
one of the 4 things is they say the last one they say is at the Center for Spiritual Awareness, they say, "You're
Hmm.
whole, perfect, and complete, just the way you are right now. There may be some
Hmm.
habits and things you wanna get rid of, but at your essence." So that
Hmm.
must have been revelatory, because doesn't the Catholic religion believe in original sin and
Yes,
all
it
of that,
does.
right?
Yes,
Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
And you know, and still that programming of you're fundamentally broken
Mhm.
is, I, I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't struggle that with that already several times this morning. It
Wow.
just, it's a hanger on her.
And so speaking of which, because I don't think that's unique to you either, Leah,
No, I don't think so.
when this stuff comes in, and you're getting programmed, especially at an early age, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. How do you navigate that? Like, how do you step into that truth that you are whole, perfect, and complete? What makes you shift from that?
Well, I'll let you know when I figure it out completely. Um, so where I'm at in my journey right now is I am starting to realize how much of my life I've spent hiding.
Mm,
Um, and I am and I consider myself an honest person, a trustworthy person. And I'm learning that that means more than what I think it means. It means not hiding. It means if you're perfect and complete and you want to get rid of this stuff, you kind of got to tell people that you've got this stuff.
well, and so
And
let's get into
so
that. Yeah, let's get into that for a second because you've said this before. Like becoming a practitioner, there's kind of some expectations that come with that, right? This expectation that
yes.
you've arrived. But tell us about that.
Well, so a bunch of practitioners got together a while back and we said, what do you wish they would have told you when you first became a practitioner? And we all said, every one of us, and this was like almost all the practitioners in our center, everybody said some version of the same thing. I wish somebody would told me that when I got the stole, it didn't mean that all my problems went away. I mean, wherever you go, you're still there. And the
There.
fact that you have learned some tools, that you are aware of your perfection, you are also aware that you are always evolving.
Mm.
And
Yeah, yeah, because
once
there is that.
again, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
better
And a
late than never.
practitioner yeah, and a practitioner, for those who may not be familiar, is like a junior minister, is probably the best way to describe it. And that you've
I
went
say,
through.
I say for, I say like a deacon.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
deacon or a junior minister or a minister in
Hmm.
training. You go through, somewhere between 4 and 6 years of training to get this license, and you spend 1 year of looking at how life got to be the way it was.
Yeah.
And that's talk about, defining moments. Much of the training is very intense, and yet at
Hmm.
the end of it, you probably I know I ended up with more questions than answers, and I really felt like it just up leveled my journey to know myself better, that human self, right, that
Hmm.
shows up in wonky ways sometimes, and then knowing that but underneath that is that spiritual perfection, and then how do you balance the two, and the expectations that people have once you become a practitioner is kind of high, and that can be a bit stressful because we're still human
Yeah,
no matter
exactly.
what, no matter what we do.
Mm.
So I really do appreciate that as well. So what chapter of your story are you in right now, Leah? And what are some of the dreams and challenges that you're experiencing?
What chapter? Well, I'm not to happily ever after yet. Um, I'm, I think if we're looking at the hero's journey, I have climbed over a couple of pretty good sized mountains, and I still have a couple of pretty substantial mountains in front of me.
Hmm.
Um, I have had, I'm very grateful and proud of myself. I think I can say that for the way that I'm able to look at life now,
Hmm.
um, for the work that I've done to get here.
Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, I am very, very aware and actively working on the shadows that I still carry with me, the wounds that I'm apparently not ready to heal yet. because, my
Mhm.
experience has been when you're ready, boom, it's done, right?
Right? That's true. Once you make the connection, right?
hmm
And
hmm
there's no resistance in here, it
And it
moves
doesn't,
progress.
yeah, and it doesn't really how much or how much you've watched other people do it or what the mechanics are.
Mhm, mhm.
There is a thing inside of you that has to be ready. And until it is, sometimes a lot of that stuff feels like spinning your wheels, but I'm willing to stick it out.
Well, awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. And we're going to cut to commercial here in a second, but don't go away. Next, we're going to talk about something that changed everything for Leah. So don't go away. We'll be right back with Leah as we head into our commercial with New Thought Media Network. Welcome back to Change Your Story, Change Your Life. I'm your host, Mitch Austin, and I'm here today with practitioner Leah Eldridge. And we're getting into the section of the show now where Leah's going to talk about something that changed everything in her life. A moment when her story basically took a right-hand turn and brought her to a whole new way of being in her life.
Are you talking about my car moment? You know, a unlike that first one, which is big and flashy, this one is small and super internal. Um, it was 2002 when I married my kid's father. I knew it was a mistake the night before, but this was one of those hiding things. I was
Mm,
hiding from my true nature. I
mhm,
was I was I don't there was a time in my life that I found that I thought if anybody ever found out what was going on in my head, the pregnant girls disappeared. I thought
mm,
I would burst into flames right there in the middle of my Catholic girls' high school if anybody found out I was a lesbian. And here's the thing, at the time, I didn't even know that word. I didn't know that it happened to girls. I thought this only happened to boys.
mm,
And so I got married um, as a way to hide, as a way to force my own hand, cure myself. I don't know what I was doing. Didn't ever ask anybody for help, just thought I
mm,
was a weirdo. And that all started to unravel. And at this point, I had three beautiful daughters, which means even mistakes come with amazing blessings. And I have grandkids now, and everything's
mm,
fantastic. But my life was unraveling. And it was rapidly unraveling. I was unhappy. My husband was unhappy. My husband was serially unfaithful.
mm,
And just life was looking terrible, and it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I didn't want anybody to see how unhappy I was, so I didn't leave the house. I wouldn't go shopping. It was ridiculous. And one day I'm driving down the street, and I had my first couple of visits to the Center for Spiritual Awareness before this. I had heard the whole perfect and complete and the idea that God is all there is. And that was evolving in me, but I was not a regular visitor because I didn't like going out. And I'm just driving down the road to go get gas before I went to go pick my kids up from school. And as clearly as if the presence was sitting next to me in my minivan, the voice said, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry. You have everything you need. Everything's going to be fine.
Wow.
And I want to say I ran straight over to church and got somebody to help me. No, I didn't start going to church regularly until 2006. But it kind of poured over me, this idea that everything is going to be okay. You are not doing this on your own. Don't worry. You're doing the best you can. It was just comforting. The only words I heard was, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. This is all going to work out. Those are the words I heard. But the rest of it was just feeling. It freaked me out. I pulled over and pulled into the gas station and went, what the heck was that?
Am I hearing voices? What's going on?
And the memory of that moment comes up for me all the time. You know, I'm going to do something for the first time and I'm nervous, and it's not even like I call it up. It just pops into the front of my awareness. Everything's going to be fine. You said you were going to do this, go and do it. And what I'm working on right now is remembering that before I allow myself to get terrified and want to quit something.
Right, that it's all going to be okay, that it's going to work out. We kind of learn that as you have enough life experience, you can look back and go, well, I thought that was going to be the end and it wasn't, or I thought
No.
that was going to the sky was going to fall and it didn't. And then you kind of catch on like, oh, there's something going on here. We're always just kind of supported and held and guided through these moments that we think are just going to be the ruin of us.
And it doesn't mean that the uncertainty is gone. It doesn't mean that the fear is gone. It doesn't mean that I stopped doubting myself. I wish I could, as soon as that doubt bug started to grow up, I wish I had the capacity to go, God told you everything's going to be okay. Just go.
So you could go
Maybe
back to that. You could go back to that moment.
Coming. Maybe that's coming.
Could be. So Kathy Clark Amos says, what a divine moment. What a gift. I
Yes.
see that people are definitely resonating with your story. And I just love that. Now looking back, Leah, and I love how you kind of brought us into that moment that you were in, like you were trying to cure yourself, you're trying to fix yourself, you're getting into the marriage, basically doing the best you could with what you had, right? So
Right.
looking back, at that moment, and that chapter of your life, what was the lesson or blessing that has made you the person that you are today?
Well, there was a certain point where, and certainly when I got that message, my belief system was, you promised till death do us part in front of all of our families, and you promised to God. Now, I no longer believed in that God, but I knew that I made that promise to something bigger than myself. And I did it consciously. I got up on the morning of that wedding and was like, this is stupid. And, the hall's rented, the church is rented. We got a lady with a harp to come and play the music. All my family's here. You're done. You just got to go do it.
Okay.
And there was a period of my life where the answer to everything was kind of that same thing. Just suck it up and do it. And there's a difference between walking through your fear and sucking it up and doing something that your inner knowingness is telling you this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. Those are two very different things. And I'm starting to get that again. Better late than never.
That's the
I
book
hope I can
title.
get
Yeah.
it out of me so that my grandkids can learn. Yeah, so that my grandkids can learn it, like maybe before they turn 18. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, I love that
Maybe
that
not.
you've walked that journey. Yeah, that you've walked that journey, and
Mhm,
you can provide them that guidance. And I love that you're
mhm.
still on this journey of unpacking, like not hiding and stepping forward and being a more authentic version of yourself. Peggy
Yeah.
Tillery says, "I love how you keep coming back to the book title. You have to
Oh,
write it." So now
no.
you're on the hook. You got to write a book.
You didn't tell
See
me
what
you were
this
gonna
show did?
invite the ministers to see this.
Mama G says we're all having a human experience being a
Mhm.
spiritual being. Ugh, isn't that true?
And we
Uh,
all have to learn how to be gentle with our human experiencing. We
ooh,
decided to do this. I keep telling myself that you
ooh.
decided this.
Somewhere along the line, right? That's
Mhm.
what a lot of
You don't
people
remember it, but you did.
we decided to come to Earth School or whatever
Mhm.
however you want to describe it.
Right.
And so yeah, I really appreciate you kind of unpacking this journey. Maybe we can get to a little bit about now. Of course, you didn't stay married.
No.
You made a shift in letting go of what wasn't you,
Mhm.
right? And stepping more into the authentic version. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that version.
Well, I think the decision to go ahead and pursue an unmarried life happened that day. E Right that day, the same day where Spirit talked to me in the car.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
I don't remember what the time frame was, and as it turns out, it's kind of funny, but the divorce wasn't really final until, like, 2017, which is ridiculous and a story in and of itself, but we thought we were divorced in 2010. Um, uh, but it was shortly after that that, um, I told him, "I know what you've been up to, and you know the truth about me, and we're just not gonna do this anymore. We need to figure out a way to, live our lives. Neither one of us are happy, and this can't be good for the kids." And um, it took a good 3 years for us to get financially untangled, to figure out how we were gonna go on living and all of that. Um, e the decision to do it was pretty fast, but the actual doing of it was anything but.
Mm,
But, once you shift that, it wasn't long after that that I came out and I made all those uncomfortable phone calls,
ooh,
and then I became what I thought was fully authentic. What I know now is a lot more authentic. I became more of who I really was. I wasn't hiding this fundamentally different part of myself that said, you know, I'm different from other people in a way that is scary right now.
mm, mm,
I would say sitting here in 2023, it's not unscary, but it's nowhere what it was when I was in high school,
right.
when I started realizing before high school that all the girls were interested in all the boys and I was interested in all the girls and nobody could ever, ever, ever know that.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
that part made a huge difference. And it's kind of surprising when I think back on it now that it did, but it did. And but there are more parts. The parts that are I don't feel enough. I don't feel privileged. I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel um I don't know. There, I don't feel healthy enough. I don't feel add the
Yeah.
adjective. We've
Right.
all
Fill
got
in
that kind of stuff.
the not
Um,
enoughness, the disease of I'm not enough.
mhm. And
And you'll never win that battle if you're trying to prove yourself to be enough because there'll always be something else.
yeah, but it's important to know that you are enough. And there
True.
are moments when I remember it. And, am I enough to share that I had this mystical experience or these two mystical experiences? Well, I found out I was enough for that. Am I enough to write a book? I mean, that's
Mm.
why I got involved with Rise and Speak. I figured I would TA the speakers and I would just, create a story and write a book. That isn't how that worked out.
Right. Right.
I didn't
Right.
want to be a practitioner. I wanted to learn more. I asked Reverend Brenda, what do I do? I took all the rest of the classes. What's next? She's like, well, practitioner one. I said, I don't want to be a practitioner. She said, you don't have to.
It's funny
Now
you
that's all I want to do. I don't,
right.
well,
It's it's funny you say that because I considered myself the accidental practitioner. I'm like, I just want to take another class. Like, what else you got?
Mhm,
Right? It's just kind of like you get into
mhm.
the zone. We're going to take just one
Yep.
more commercial break here. And
Okay.
then when we come back, Leah's going to share a little bit about her lived experience and advice she would give to anyone who's wanting to live a more authentic life or has a big part of themselves they've been hiding and some things that she can offer you just from her own journey. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Welcome back, everybody, to Change Your Story, Change Your Life. I'm your host, Mitch Austin. I'm here with Leah Eldridge, and we're getting to the final portion of our show here. And so, Leah, we've talked a little bit about these mystical experiences that you finally got the courage to share, that you've been hiding. You've been hiding parts of yourself throughout your life that you've been stepping forward and bringing into the light. That you were in a marriage with a man and you really didn't want to be in relationship with men. Women were more who you've always found yourself attracted to. What would you say to people who are hiding parts of themselves still that nobody knows about or that they might be afraid to express? What kind of wisdom or support or inspiration could you give them?
You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is my answer to everything. If you're struggling, get yourself to a practitioner. And for those people who don't know practitioners or don't know what that means, uh, if you have a trusted friend,
Mhm.
you know, it, and it doesn't matter if they're a religious friend or spiritually minded or an atheist or whatever.
Mhm.
Spirit exists in all of us, and none of us can really explain how it works. But there is something about confessing, not like
Mm.
when they send the second graders into the little box with the creepy old man. That's different. Um, but but airing your thoughts. Um,
Mm.
if you're talking to somebody who is trusted, a lot of times what comes out is just, you know, as a practitioner, we sit with people and listen to them talk all the time. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not true. You are amazing. And that's just a situation. I think that the answer is if you can't figure it out on your own, get somebody else. And, if you, and maybe it's a therapist. If somebody has some letters behind their names, that means they're trained to listen better than the rest of us. But if you don't want to do that, or you can't do that, or you're not ready for that, call your best friend.
I love that. I love that. I teach a workshop called Taming Your Inner Critic, and I always say, don't be alone in your head without adult supervision, right?
That's
Because our
right.
mind makes up stories. It makes up things. And a lot of times it's not telling us a story that's accurate about ourselves and our situation. So if we can get someone who's a sounding board, or even hear the words coming out of our mouth, sometimes we can actually see just how untrue that is.
Well, and one of the things that I'm learning, I have several practitioners who I consider my practitioner, and I also have a therapist, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I have somebody who's helping me. I don't want slow change. I want fast change. I want to get better at being that whole perfect and complete, beautiful, intentionally created person that I am.
Mhm.
And it's, sometimes I ask myself, who is it who doesn't want to make the presentation? Who isn't, who's afraid to make the phone calls? Is it 58-year-old Leah with tons of experience? Or is it 13-year-old Leah who's afraid of getting caught doing something wrong, or who's afraid of being misunderstood, or who's afraid of
Mm,
being judged? And
mm.
sometimes it's 13-year-old Leah. Sometimes it's 6-year-old Leah who, with the red cape that shows up and gets us both in trouble, you know?
Right, and it's interesting how these younger versions of ourselves are still active in our psyche, and
Mm-hmm.
different events in our environment can bring that out. I remember I was in a city manager meeting, and the assistant city manager reminded me of my father, and he came right at me with something, was just kind of, attacking me basically in the meeting, and I became 6 years old right there
Yeah.
in the meeting. I couldn't even
I
talk.
And what's really upsetting to me is sometimes, thankfully not very often, but sometimes that 35-year-old Leah who doesn't want to go to the store, who doesn't want to face anybody, who's ashamed, that person still shows up. I would like
Mm,
that to stop.
mm,
Not often, but when I'm like,
right.
oh, we're going back there today. But I usually figure it out like a day later, right?
Well, it's interesting because as you're talking, I kinda notice your process, like, there's an
Hmm.
observer or a witness to it.
Hmm.
Like sometimes we just fall into these patterns and don't activate that observer part of ourself that's seeing how we're showing up in the moment as the 13-year-old or the person in resistance or whatever trigger might be going on, but it sounds like you've cultivated an awareness of it.
Well, can I jump in here? So that is a cultivated skill, and it comes from writing.
Mm,
And I know that two of my writing circle buddies are on here because they've both made comments already. But I am very into journaling and looking at how I get myself into trouble. That's where that comes from. And it's getting better. I'm getting better at it, you know. So everybody buy a journal. And you have to write with
everybody
and you have
everybody
to write with a pen. Something there's, I used to journal a lot electronically. I still do from time to time,
right.
but there's something about that activity of writing the old-fashioned way that really unlocks the things that are hiding there, at least for me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that because I think, I'm not a journaler, but now I think I need to try and, see what that's like, at least commit to it for a little bit of time and see what comes out in my own process, because it sounds
Yeah.
like an amazing
And you don't have
benefit.
to you don't have to do it for hours. I know a lot of people who, will sit down and write for 7 minutes.
Mhm, mhm. So, Leah, we talked about the authentic self, but what about those of us online or who hear the show today? Maybe they've had a mystical experience and they're hesitant to share it,
Mhm.
or express it with somebody, what would you say to them?
Well, I think first things first, share it with somebody who is safe, a confident, your partner. If you've already shared it with your partner, so that was my thing. I had shared the shooting star story with my partners over the years, but nobody else. Nobody else. I'd never even contacted the other two people who were there until after Rise and Speak.
Mhm.
Um, but there's something about getting it out there. Just like, what do you do when you have a problem? And the more it comes up into your active conscious mind, the more it comes back. And then other people see things that you didn't see. But for me,
Mhm.
the really powerful thing was the beginning of the Rise and Speak process is write your story, which was the part I was excited about. And when I wrote, the memories that came back, the vivid memories, none of the
Mhm.
wisdom, but the feeling of
Mhm.
knowing was
Mhm.
so strong and powerful. I think that those things are a gift, and I think we all have them.
Mhm.
Some of us have big, bright ones, but I think more often they're like that thing in the car where it's a voice. And maybe
Mhm.
the voice isn't from outside you. Maybe you're like, you get some intuition that comes in between your own ears, and you're like, there is no way I'm that smart. The
Right.
place where ideas come from. Do you ever get an idea and you're like, oh my God, I got it?
Yes.
That's not the person who's usually driving this bus, is all I got to say about that.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that, and it can come in many forms, but I think the more that we talk about it, the more we'll talk about it. But was there
Hmm.
something about the Rise and Speak experience that made you feel comfortable to share this story? Because I know you didn't pick one for a while.
Well, that's your experience as the teacher. I did pick one. It just wasn't that good. Um, so Rise and Speak has to be, because of the way it works, a pretty small group of people, and they're all that trusted person. And Mitch has it, he's got it. I've done lots of these things now. Um, and he's got it really dialed in. There's some exercises that help you figure out what you want to talk about, but then you vet those ideas, and you're working on it. You're working on it all the time, but you're working on it in this group once a week, and it really, really hones it. I love this work that Mitch has created. I love being a TA and watching the light bulbs go on for other people. I love talk night. People get up there, and we've had people who cried all the way to the last one and then just get up there and beam.
Yeah.
We've had a beloved friend who made herself sick and missed it and then made it up there a year later. Um, it's profound work, and it's a rare opportunity to take something that's really precious to you and to present it in a sacred space and have people appreciate it. That final night when you give it to the audience, the appreciation is overwhelming, because this is not like what we get on TV. It's not even like what we get on podcasts or documentaries or something. It's people showing us who they really are, and that is uncommon right now.
It is uncommon, and that's why I do this show, because when we tell a story from our heart, it touches every heart. It can't
Yeah.
not.
Hmm.
And that is the medicine of the world. And that's what I really want to encourage everybody who's on here, whether you're in Rise and Speak or not. Maybe you're at coffee with a friend
Hmm.
and you can share a story of love, hope, or transformation that brings a little more hope and light into their world, a little more courage, because we're better together. We're better together.
Hmm.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
mean,
want
think about what we do. I'm thinking about the saddest part in people's lives is when somebody that you love transitions. We just had this
to.
in my family, and we had a celebration of life. a couple of weeks later, and everybody came, and we went to a park. It was gorgeous, and they just shared stories. They shared funny stories, they shared embarrassing stories, and people from all eras of my brother-in-law's life were there. And I remember thinking about it. This is what it's all about. Look at this. Our lives are just a tapestry, and we weave them together, and we pull other people in, and it's so powerful when we share even the most benign little stories in times of need.
It so is. We think in stories, we move in stories, we live in stories. And when we start to tell ourselves a different story, then we go off onto a whole nother adventure. What shows up, who shows up, how we see things. And I really appreciate you a little bit about your story and how it's unfolded and the different influencing factors that helped you along the way to tell a different story and go on a different journey and to get to higher ground as you continue to live a more authentic life. It's so powerful, and I'm so grateful for you being on the show. If somebody wants to reach out to you and do some work with you or just connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, the best way to get a hold, look, it says that right there. It says my phone number. My
Oh,
phone
there it
number
is.
is 916-640-7288. The best way to get me right now, honest to God, is text messages. I get bombarded with junk mail or junk phone calls.
Yeah.
So text message is usually the best. And I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I love watching people unfold. That is the joy of my life. Whether whether I'm doing it at work or it's part of what happens on a Sunday or in a practitioner session, I just love it.
Well, thank you again for coming. I want to give a shout out of gratitude to New Thought Media Network for hosting the show. Also, the studio I'm in, 18sourceproductions.com. Check them out. They do everything audio and visual. They're amazing here. I'm so grateful to be here. I also have some courses coming up. I have a Metaphysical Parables Decoded class coming up August 22nd. So if you just reach out to me at speakteachinspire.com, I can get you hooked up with that. And I'm going to be speaking at CSL Monterey this Sunday. I'm so excited. My hometown, finally speaking there. So grateful. I'll be at the SOAR conference as well. Please join us for our next show on Wednesday, August 9th. I'm going to have Michelle Wadley. Reverend Michelle will be on, and the show will start at 11 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll be at Asilomar right there with the influence of Ernest Holmes. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming on today. Be sure to shine your light and share your story. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for watching.